I have more of a more casual styled interviewing, but it is like I want to get to know you, I want to understand you, and I do believe with AI, I think that's the big concern is are we gonna we're gonna automate the SDRs out of the equation. Humans still at the end of the day want to buy from humans. People want to deal with with people.
Mr. John Eitel, welcome to the Revenue Squared podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Likewise, Jorge. Great to see you again.
John, we're going to start just by getting to know you a little bit. I'd love to know who John Eitel is. So can you give us just a quick introduction? Who are you and what have you done? What are your hobbies?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll take you through kind of me as a person, professionally, personally, and all the things that make me tick and who I am. But I would say the quick version, professionally, career builder of sales teams at hyper growth companies going through the challenges of scale. So when companies get to that awkward adolescence phase of things start to kind of break and you get to a certain size and scale where it's time to think about the team and the systems and the processes, that's where I've really kind of tuned my skills, is coming in and helping organizations go through that shift, get ready for that next phase of growth, and helping them go through the grow up period there. So that's me professionally. Personally, I'd say I have a great family here, two boys in their teenage years, one just entering college, my lovely wife who we've been together for almost 30 years, and live here in Austin, Texas, which is becoming a thriving hub, especially in the pandemic with folks starting to move wherever they want to be. We've benefited with a lot of that shift and change here.
Yeah. So let me start with the first thing that you mentioned. You mentioned that your expertise are in companies that are going through that adolescence phase. What does that phase look like, and how do you identify what a company needs in that phase?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, I was, blessed early in my career and lucky to be a part of a company that went through that hyper growth multiple different times and kind of different phases of evolutions. And so it was a really great time for me professionally to be pushed out of my comfort zone regularly. I became known as someone who would always raise their hand and say, put me into this one and I'll figure it out. And they kept, kind of challenging me in new ways. And so it really taught me how to come in and look at all those things, understand, where the breakdowns are, and how to prioritize and move through them quickly there. And so ever since I, left that one startup that, started as a 50 employee company. When I left, we were 7,000 global, publicly traded, so went through a lot of different kind of phases and stages, to help me understand, that's what I want to go do more of. I want to go seek out companies that are hitting that spot. And helping them, go through that kind of journey there. And so, back to your question, I think I've built a lot of pattern recognition throughout the times to just see, what are the things that you need to kind of focus in on. There are some common elements that you always see repeatedly, right? I think talents, how do you kind of continuously, help develop and scale up talent? Companies, if companies are growing faster than the team is growing, personally there, how do we support them with the right, mentors, coaches, people to be able to help them develop, give them the access to training and knowledge. Also bringing in folks from different, businesses that have gone through these journeys too, to help augment as well as part of that. I think that's a really key thing is, sometimes these companies will promote a lot from within, which is a great thing. But I think sometimes if you don't bring in new viewpoints, you see the faults of that really quickly. So, figuring out how to upskill, augment, build some the right processes, looking at what's breaking down, why are our sales metrics starting to lag in certain areas, or why are they starting to stall, and what are the different process improvements and things like that. And so it just comes down to being able to quickly assess some of those metrics and dive into them, and then thinking about what the right course is and managing the change journey on that too, right? You can't do them all at once. So what is your hit list, and how do you kind of prioritize them there?
And John, the company that you were talking about earlier, was that Rackspace?
That was Rackspace, yeah. That was
the
company that got my start out there.
So you were there for 13 years, which is a whole career, and you started from an accounts manager all the way to the VP level. Can you talk to me about that journey, and what were your learnings throughout the different phases of those 13 years?
Yeah, no, good question, and yeah, I love to tell people that's where I grew up, and it's really unique to be able to be at a company for 13 years,
Yeah.
not common, I would say, what probably helped was the company was changing a lot during that time. So, when I came in, they had landed their first big enterprise account, so I was brought in to help them like cement that because I had as an AE, I had experience managing big accounts, so it was like, okay, come in and manage that account, and then once I proved that I could do that. I was like, okay, let's go acquire more of those accounts, which became you know, once you were doing it with repeatability, it's like build a team to go build, to go after this motion here. The really neat thing was also like once we started to see more and more of that traction, with the team that I built, it was like, let's build a new product to go after that. So I got to be a part of a team with the CTO and the chief product officer, and bringing the sales experience of like what are these customers telling us, what do we need to build, so being able to help them think about what a new product would look like for enterprise customers. About halfway through my time at Rackspace was the early kind of precursor to how you got websites online. 20 years ago, you would get a server and a rack in a data center, and then about halfway through the time that I was there, the cloud became a thing. So, our company and Amazon were kind of neck and neck, bringing what was the early days of the cloud to market there. And so, again, I raised my hand and said, hey, I'd love to go try to figure out how do we sell cloud computing. It was units that were very scale up, scale down, right? So how do you build commission plans to motivate sellers to go do that? At the early days of the cloud, evolution there, the buyer was very, very technical, so it was a lot of developers. So it was like, how do you get sales teams that can sell to developers at this time? And so again, just like me being pushed out of my comfort zone, allowed me to kind of go help the business forge this new path. And then interestingly enough, the world became, we at the beginning we thought it was a cloud world and a dedicated world, and like we found out later that like people want both. So it was like, okay, how do you put the two businesses back together? And because I had experience in both, it was the perfect time for me to come over as the VP of sales to lead both of those initiatives. And so, for me, it was like, one, don't be afraid to be pushed out of your comfort zone. Like I think for folks that are listening to this, I think. Where I learned and grew the most was every time I raised my hand, and they were, kind enough to let me take the learnings and work through them there. But it helped me advance my career really quickly, getting uncomfortable and working through those things with them there. And so I think that kind of really challenged and pushed me along in this journey here, and it really also taught me like how to flex up in different ways. And so that was a bit of what it was like, and why you'd stay up at a company for 13 years is it actually like a couple of different times changed and became a different company, during different times in that 13 years. And so I think as long as you're feeling like, the challenges are there and you're able to kind of grow, like that's how you can stay at a company for that long and be a part of a growth story like that.
Awesome. So one of the questions I got recently was, what's your secret as you progress? And one of the things that I told them is that in every stage, I raised my hand. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I would be able to figure it out. And, did it feel like that for you as you moved through the ranks?
I was going to say, actually, and for those that don't know, Jorge and I worked together for some time, and oftentimes have had kindred spirit moments, and I think this is one we haven't really talked about. But that's exactly it. I felt like there was a lot of times that other peers could have easily raised their hand, but they might have been timid and didn't want to do it because of fear of failure. And I was like, let's give it a shot. And so my running joke on that was, that I didn't know better. I wasn't smart enough to know that it might be a bad idea to raise my hand, and they were kind enough to let me do it over and over again, and it just worked. And so I think it's important to lean into those moments when you see them here.
Absolutely. At the beginning, you talked about your passion for training and developing teams. Actually, I'd like to take one step back, and it's I think everybody has a particular formula on how to hire the right people. I think in the past, just seeing the people that you've hired, myself included, I think you've done a good job. So, what's
Let this be the
your
record. Let this go on the record. Yeah, I was gonna say thank
exactly?
you.
What's your special sauce? What's your take on hiring? What do you look for?
Yeah, such a great question. I think like you have to know what you're hiring for. Like that's first and foremost, and every company is different, and I think that's the one thing is, what you and I looked for at Canva might be completely different from what I'm looking at for at Demand Base. So come in and understand like your unique sales context and really be, I would say thoughtful and intentional about like what are the requirements for each of the roles. I think sometimes, that doesn't get often recorded or it gets recorded and it doesn't evolve. And so I'd say like that's one thing that I love to layer in is that, the people that you hired 3 years ago may not be the same, profile that you want 3 years later, right? And so how are you evolving, those profiles and being intentional about it and
Yeah.
making sure that you have an understanding of, a scorecard of what you're looking for. So I think like first off, like, I like to set that up front. But I think like my secret sauce, I think, is also just getting to the core of understanding, people and motivations and drive. And I think like one thing that is consistent with all the companies that I've worked at is that, if you find people that work really, really hard and have kind of the grit and tenacity and they're intelligent and curious, like they will fit in most contexts. And so I think like, grit and hard work is something that I try to really dig into, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things to interview for. My thoughts on that is that if I were to ask Jorge in an interview like how hard do you work, like you being a smart interviewer would say like he wants to know that I work hard, so I'm going to tell him every cliche. I'm going to say everything that's makes him feel like I'm going to be a hard worker here, and so. I try to actually like, again, put people at ease. I have more of a like a more casual styled interviewing, but it is like, I want to get to know you. I want to understand you. And I really look for things in their kind of past that tell me that they're hard workers, right? Like looking at their career progression and trajectory. Are they someone who gets kind of pulled from place to place? Where do they go? Someone took them there. To someone who, was willing to like step up and raise their hand and lean into some of these, kind of uncomfortable challenges, like looking at some of those things. And even like going back to as far as like their childhood, like one of my, infamous favorite questions to ask was, tell me about the first job you ever had. What did you learn from it? What did you take away from it? And oftentimes people usually are like, this is that job that I got right out of college. And I'm like, no, like the first time, like actually like take me back to like when you first started working, what were you doing? And how did you, again, what did they learn and take away as the biggest part of that? And there's really no wrong answers. You can tell like how they light up, how they respond to it. A lot of times it can be like, I was, wasn't going to get a car. My parents made that clear early on. So like if I wanted to have a car, I would need to save up. So I, started working at an early age and this job and that job, right? And I was able to buy that car, right? Seeing their them light up about being able to achieve that accomplishment. Starting early, working when their friends weren't. Like, there's just some things that you'll get out of that. And my belief is that like work ethic isn't something that just strikes you at like age 27. I think it's something that kind of starts early in you.
Yeah.
And it'll give you some insight into that. So I have had some really great stories of, again, folks who were like, it was this first job out of college, and I'm like, no, take me back to like the very first time you can remember, and one person was like, look, I actually talked the manager into letting me work because like you had to be a certain age and I wasn't that yet and they let me do it. And, because they took a chance on me, like I had, more, they were a lifeguard and they saved more people than anybody else, even the other folks there, even down to like an AE who, really surprised me, but basically said like, hey, I lived in Laredo, which is a border town of Mexico. My grandfather moved over, or migrated over with like nothing but the shirt on his back. And he's like, at age 13, I was pulling tires, out of a warehouse and putting them on cars and sweating out my body weight. And these tires weighed sometimes more than me, and I'm like, okay, well, what were you proud of? And he was like, look, I respected the hell out of my grandfather for being able to provide this opportunity for me. I wasn't going to squander it, right? And so, I made sure to go to college. I made sure to do, X, Y, Z, and that's why I'm here today. And I was like, okay, this person's got it. So, anyways, I think it's, really down to getting to understand them, getting to know them, and understanding drive and motivation there.
So you know what I'm going to ask you next, right? What was your first job and what did you learn from it?
Wouldn't it be pretty awful if I was like, well, like actually, I didn't start until 27. No, no,
Oh, fair enough.
I love this one, and actually, I feel like you and I talk about parenting as well.
Yeah.
Like I want to make sure that my kids have the same thing, in them as well. But my dad was the first in his family to go to college. He was pretty direct with me that like everything, I'd have to earn it on my own, and so he
Yeah.
actually. We grew up in a beach community. He ran beach pavilions, which is these places where you can kind of rent a volleyball, get a hot dog or a hamburger, in a bathing suit, and they had the bathrooms there. And so when I was, I think 12 or 13, I was cleaning the bathrooms. Like that was the first job he gave me. Which like if you were like, talk about shitty jobs. I'm like, yeah, literally. They would blow a whistle every hour on the hour, and I would go in there and I'd clean the bathrooms. And then like the next year after that, he was like, you get to work in the kitchen and like you're gonna clean the grills and like clean the grease traps and mop the floors, and so on and so forth. And every year I got to build up higher on the ladder. But when
Mm.
I was in high school, my senior year, I was actually managing a couple of the locations. And I remember hearing someone who was 26, 27, who was like, listen to him, not because he's the boss's son, but because he's done every job in here. And if you want to know how to get it done, he'll tell you how to do it. And I was like, okay, I've earned the respect. And so I think for me, that was kind of like that pride moment of like, okay, it wasn't given to me, it was earned, which was cool.
Absolutely.
How about you? I guess if I can flip it around here,
Oh
where I
man.
don't think I ever asked you.
So, I lived near a lake, and when I was 10 years old, me and my older brother, we would go out in a canoe. We had one of those transistor radios, and we would put in the canoe, and our job was to clean up algae and whatever fell in the lake, right? So it was. And it was actually really nice because we would spend the summers out on the lake, and we would just hustle. And our goal was to buy a CD player.
Uh-huh.
And of course, we were getting paid like $1 an hour, so it was so it was good child labor there. But it was great. I mean, I remember it quite fondly.
Yeah. And did you get the CD player? That's the most important part here.
We got the CD player. We got the special one where you can actually put 5 CDs, and then
A changer. Wow. All right.
exactly.
Things our kids will never know existed here.
Exactly, exactly. John, when you find that great person, how do you manage them? So how do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them hungry? Or do they need to be kept hungry? What's your take on management?
Yeah, like I do. I personally, believe that like you need to tap into people's potential, and even, I mean, I think if we need to motivate folks to do their job, I think then we probably, to one part of your question, we made a mistake, right? In the hiring there. But if we're hiring very smart, capable, motivated people, look, I think you need to understand how to tap into what makes them tick and what makes them unique, and also like that's the way that you get more out of them and also help them reach their potential. And so, long-winded answer to say like I think with each of them you have to kind of tailor it and like learn that early on, and that becomes that comes out of like your early one-on-ones and in the process. Getting to know them and understanding what motivates them, what drives them, and then really being able to kind of like translate that back to them. But you get so much more if you can unlock that piece, and that they'll value you more as a leader too because you've taken the time to understand that. And so, I think early on in my career, I do think like I had the quick learning that not everybody is motivated the same way and wants to be recognized the same way. Like I was in a meeting
Okay.
with a lot of leaders in like engineering, and they were like, what's your favorite like way to be recognized? And like one of the sales leaders was like, I closed a big deal. The CEO had me up on stage, wanting to hear me tell my story of this big, win we had, right? And this engineering leader was like, that is my worst nightmare, And so like, I think again, figuring out really quickly that people do, want to be recognized and they want to be motivated in different
Yeah,
ways, and then just kind of figuring that out and trying to tailor to them and unlock that. I think you become a better leader.
absolutely. John, there's two questions from the chat. I'm going to read the first one. It says on the first one on the SDR role evolution. It says you were a sales rep at Dell in early 2000. How have you seen this role evolve, and where do you think it's going, considering all the AI tools, augmentation coming to market?
That's a good question. I have a strong opinion on it. I do feel like one, I'm a big believer that the SDR organization is the lifeblood of every business I've been a part of. Like it is, if you've done correctly, it is the future, bench for talent. It becomes this great developmental role, which is really amazing. I think, for me, I think it's, I did SDR type roles in my past, and I would say like, you get so much exposure to all the like hard parts of sales early, and you get a lot of the repetition, that you need to learn early, and you build, structure and strategy early. And so anyways, I think it's a great role for future talent. And obviously it's, where, if you do it right, it's where all the sales conversations kind of begin, right? This is just such a great, important role here. And so, one, I'm a big believer that it's continuously, evolving in its importance here. And I do believe with AI, like I think that's the big concern is like, are we gonna, we're gonna automate the SDRs out of the equation? And my strong belief on this is no. Like actually, I work with, some partners in the conversational intelligence world, and you've commented a lot on this, Jorge, and even your LinkedIn post, and I agree, completely here. Humans still, at the end of the day, want to buy from humans. Like people want to deal with, with people. Yeah. And so I think that the world of a human completely disappearing from this, kind of part of the process to me seems like it's, very far out of reach and probably not realistic. But I do think there is going to be more optimization. Like I think the AI is going to be able to make it much more, easier for them to do their job. I think it's already making it where they can surface the things that they need really quickly. So instead of like, SDRs, BDRs in the past having to spend hours and hours building lists and researching, like there's great tools out there now that basically surface, the, companies that are in market for your product, that are showing intent signals to buy, and you can have their contact information immediately. So gone are the days of like having to go pull all these pieces together, right? AI is able to surface it. And so I do think like it's going to make them more efficient. I do worry in some ways that we're going to over-engineer on, too much automated copy. Like I feel like I've seen it and tested it. I think the ability to get, emails written from AI is a great start, but I think it still needs the human touch and it needs the personalization. And so, I'd warn anybody against that, being too much of a, overused hack to it, but I think it can shortcut some of the steps and make them more efficient. I do think we may need less, and I think that's just part of the kind of the world that we're in. Is that we're hopefully going to get some optimizations here. But I think there's going to be still a great career path for folks to come in and learn this, and then really kind of take their learnings in AI to the AEs as well, which I think is going to be another part that is going to see some transition and change too in the sales motion.
Absolutely.
There's an argument, if I may, that, and I want to know your opinion on this, that the AI is also going to lead to a lot more spam that every buyer is going to receive. But I think there's also a niche or a possibility that those SDRs or those AEs that are inside the bubble but using AI as an optimization tool are going to be able to stand out from the spammer crowd. How do you position yourself in that argument? How do you think is going to evolve in that sense?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, I think, you're already seeing it. And I think that I feel like I've seen more content being created on LinkedIn. So I think like people are using it for content creation. I think people are using it for emails. I'm seeing, just already just like a mental note of that. Inversely, it is interesting. Like, I've had some sellers be like, hey, I sent you an email. Unfortunately, when you start getting inundated, and I didn't see the email, back to that comment, when you get inundated with so much of this, to your point, Luis, like your brain starts to kind of compartmentalize it. So it's like I can see the very overly done emails that feel like outreach, and I just don't even look at them. Like I actually without even foldering them, yet in my Gmail, my mind is already doing it. And so I think the folks that will break through are the ones that will stand out. And I think there is a breakthrough there. There's also some really interesting, I think cool things happening from a regulation standpoint that I think are going to help this. Like Google's basically saying that they're going to clamp down on mass sending of email. And so I think that's in response to this, that we're already seeing. I had a pet peeve with this even before AI, in that I feel like sometimes, outreach and sales loft and some of these sequencing tools can be, overused in the wrong ways. And if we gave them to young sales reps without much guidance and governance, like I would kiddingly say they'd load up the spam cannon and shoot off 1,000 emails. And that's what probably put us into this place here. And so they're going to clamp down on that, and I hear that the next kind of phase of that is that they're going to clamp down on phone dialers. So phone dialers will probably be next, which, fits. And I believe it. And I actually am like looking forward to it as a consumer, to be able to answer my phone and not have to worry about this, number that I don't know, that I'm sure is someone probably going to call to sell me, or trying to sell me. But it means that we're clamping down on those things, which I think means it will give rise to this more personalized experience. And so I think that, the ideal scenario is that an SDR, BDR isn't sending 1,000 emails. They're sending 10, but they know that they're to the, because we're getting so much, signal and intent and feedback from the, the buyer, the 10 that you're reaching out to, will be the right buyers that you're reaching out. They're in market, they're looking for your product, right? And it's the right title. Like, I think that's a perfect world that I'd love to see us get to eventually here. And I think AI can be a big enabler to that.
So what's an email that would attract your attention, John? I mean, your inbox probably looks like mine. It's like flooded. Your phone probably looks like mine as well. I have 50 missed calls, numbers I don't recognize.
Yeah.
What's a call or an email that you would say, you know what, I'm going to respond to this one?
Yeah, look, I mean, I do think it does matter if you are in market for that product, right? I think that is an important thing. That's hard. Like, you can't, it's hard to nail that unless, you have, things like, kind of demand-based Sixth Sense, not to plug my current company here, but, being able to see that, like, hey, Jorge is out there looking for this product, my email will probably land a little bit more. There are ways to find it, even, just doing it the old-fashioned way. Like, I think, back in the day, I used to look at, like, what are they posting on Twitter? Because sometimes that shows what they're researching and, what questions they're asking, right? So that's just a place that's out there. LinkedIn has been such a great platform to see, like, what's, you can kind of read through, the lines of some of your posts, Jorge, and see, like, okay, what does he really care about? What is he thinking about, right? And so if my product now matches to that, like, that's what's going to cut through the noise. And so I do think when someone, like, from a brand that I have been potentially thinking about reaching out to comes to me, I'm like, okay, this is perfect. Like, let's talk about this. Or look if they've taken the time to really personalize it. Like, I think that's still very critical. Like, my mind really, I'm sure you do the same way. I'm kind of curious, like, when you look at your inbox, you can spot, non-personalized from a mile away. Like, it's even in the subject. Like, the subjects, like, are just very generic and, like, overly promising of things that can't really be real, And so it's like, and so I think people, back to people buy from, people and want to connect with humans, like, being able to personalize it to show that they understand you, they understand what you care about, and they may have a solution. Like, that's the thing that gets my attention there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think any email longer than a few sentences will generally lose me. Unless, I mean, it has to be a hell of a first sentence. That's the that's the thing.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that is actually, like, if there's any takeaway for anybody listening, like, I don't have the attention span for it anymore, unfortunately. But I used to, as a young seller, think that I'm going to write this very compelling, argument in an email. And when they get to the end, it's going to just, like, almost close itself. And it's like, didn't even read it. Like, I think if it was, really, not punchy and in a few lines, then my mind also pivots off that because I'm just too busy there. And unfortunately, that's a miss sometimes young sellers, don't catch there.
Absolutely. I'm going to read another question from the chat. It says, hi, John. In a scale-up that is growing in the go-to market, what do you think is the healthy growth percentage between inbound and outbound sales?
Yeah, good question. I think, and I tend to, really think about it what I can control, so I'd say, like, it really, there's a lot of factors, but I'd say, like, to give some value to this question here. Look, I think inbound, if you get a build a healthy inbound motion, that's great. And I think that's awesome that you have this. I think, early stage startups don't have inbound. All they have is outbound typically because no one knows you exist, and so, like, when you do hit this, like, great size, you start to see that you have brand awareness. People know, that you're out there and they seek you out. And that's a great thing. but I always try and tend to think about it, when to the outbound again, what can we control there? I think like when you're scaling up sales teams, like I try to gear it to, it's like, kind of 80-20 probably, outbound to inbound there. I think anything, more, that gets closer to 50-50, you really run a risk of like, how do you continue to scale that and add more people there? How do you make sure that, you're forcing people to work every opportunity, with some rigor there, right? I think if it's 100% inbound, I've seen, or even when you get closer to 50%, I see a lot of folks, kind of cherry picking, like what's the easiest, what's the best to go to. And so I think some scarcity, will build for better sellers, I think. Being a seller also, it means that you've got much more control on your destiny, right? You're not waiting on, marketing to deliver leads. And if something were to go wrong, if Google were to change the algorithm, you're out of the job, all of a sudden here, it's like, you're actually more in control, and that allows you to scale.
Absolutely. Another question from the chat, John, says, what are the skills and attributes you should be looking for when hiring a salesperson in 2025?
Wow. Look, I think we touched a bit on this, but I think, just, the same rules apply. Like, I think hard work, still isn't going to go away. And I think just natural curiosity, I think, is one thing to really look for, and are they a constant learner? Because I think that's, I enjoy, how much, seeing how much sales is shifting and changing, Jorge, I know you feel the same way. We've talked a bit about this, but like the seller of, when I started, versus, 2025 is a completely different person. I like this I like this new class of, sellers that are coming out. And I do feel like they are going to be much more savvy on tech. They're going to be much more adaptive to some of these new trends. And I think it's really fun. I think actually it's also neat to see that they think about things like mental health. Like actually like a, side passion of mine is, how do you manage, your head, being a seller today? And I think there's a lot of pressure and stress, and it's really even more so compounded. Yeah. I think it's actually, it doesn't get talked about enough, but I think it's gotten a lot harder in sales, for a lot of reasons, right? We're distributed in most places, so you're working from home, which means, you've got the comforts of home, but you also don't have the support system to say like, hey man, I just got knocked down because we lost a deal that I fought 6 months for, right? And you don't have that, peer or leader to pick you up off the floor and say like, hey, it's going to be all right. Let's get after it again, right? And so, being able to rebound, back means you've got to do it yourself. And so I think that, the sellers today, I think, are thinking a lot more about like, managing their mental game, being much more resilient, and having the right outlets. And so I think it's really cool to see that. I think it's not only a smarter, savvier, seller, but it's, someone who's more in tune with themselves, which I think is really cool.
What are your personal tips for that?
I'm always testing new stuff. You and I haven't caught up on that. I've gone deep on the cold plunge front.
All right, good.
Went through a couple of different iterations on that, but I have a son who plays football, so we got into it somewhat for his recovery in hard workouts. But I really got excited about doing it, and like almost addictive in the beginning, where I was doing it kind of 3 times a day, and I started out with doing like the go out and buy your own ice at the store, and realized that doesn't work out. And so I invested in a system with the chiller, and then I just put a sauna in now. So I'm going to test out doing kind of the Wim Hof method, which is neat. And so look, that's really geeky way to tackle it. I think like it doesn't have to be that complicated. I think early on in my career, I learned like giving myself space for working out, giving myself space for like being able to go run. And I think there's always times where you're busy, you're stressed out, and you're like, I don't have time for it. And it's such a great, realization that you can have, where it's like stepping away from the desk for like 30 minutes, maybe an hour, to just clear your head and go do that. Like, all of a sudden just changes your mindset, changes your perspective, gives you a great outlet there. I was talking to a lot of people about even like, we just wrapped up Q1. Hopefully folks had some successful endings there, but there's so much energy that gets expended into a quarter close. You put all your time, energy, your planning, your strategy, and then like you leave it all out in the field there. But this quarter ended with the weekend, and it was great to talk to folks about like what did they do, and it was like work out, see family, give yourself time to like meditate, read. I think you got to figure out what your rituals are. And there's a lot of very complicated ones, like the ones I'm thinking about now, which are just kind of fun to geek out about. But I think there's just some simple ones like being around loved ones and making sure you make time for working out.
Absolutely. I haven't quite got into the cold plunge yet, but it's coming. Yeah, so it's
next time you're in Austin, I was going to say I know you're here occasionally. We'll do that instead of coffee and catch up here.
All right, deal. A few more questions from the chat. Says, hi John, how do you ensure alignment and collaboration between sales, marketing, and customer success for a seamless customer experience?
Oh man, great question. In so many ways, and like it's something that we at Demand Base actually talk a lot about, because I think that's one of the things that our product helps with. But I would say personally, like everybody needs to be thinking about alignments across the board. It often gets talked about on sales and marketing, because I think that's probably one of the most tense relationships at times. But I think it's great that they called out in this question that it needs to follow all the way to CX and follow the customer journey here. Look, big ones like communication up front. Like I think that's the big one. Like, do you have a great way to communicate with your counterparts on that? Do the leaders of those organizations, so like the CMO and the CRO, are they in lockstep, and do they think about the same goals and targets? If not, that's something to think about. But I think when I've seen it at its worst. It's like the sales team misses another quarter and marketing's out celebrating because they hit their, kind of lead quota there. It's like, okay, something's amiss, right? And so you want to make sure that, again, both teams hopefully, are seeing the same thing in their dashboards, that they feel aligned to each other's outcomes. And so I think making sure that you have a healthy communication, and you're constantly reviewing it on a regular, basis here too. I do feel like, over the last few years, again, we all got distributed, which I think has been beneficial in a lot of ways, but it also means that we probably don't take the time to communicate as much. And so, when you are having, misalignment issues, when you're not communicating, it just furthers this problem, right? And I've seen like all these bad spirals that happen afterwards, where it's like, marketing is creating leads that the sales team, doesn't deem are the right leads, or we're not going after the right, kind of audience, but sales isn't telling them, so they just keep doing it, and then like, marketing, is like, well, why isn't sales following up on those leads? And they're like, because they don't think they're of value, right? And so it's just, the faster you can get to ground on, misalignment and miscommunication, the better. And that flows all the way to CX. I think that you gotta, again, have a regular cadence of communications. Like we started to do a go-to-market town hall, which was sales and CX together, hearing from their leaders, like what are our goals, what are our objectives, what do we both care about, and what are we accountable to? And like when they get out of alignment, like what are we doing about it, right? Make sure we talk about it and not just, rush quickly to place blame on the other team, or cast doubt that it's not their fault there.
They tend to say that the persona of the CRO was born out of the misalignment of sales, marketing, and CX, and that the CRO almost serves as a marriage counselor for all three, right? Do you agree with that assessment? Do you agree that there should be a CRO that has a revenue target, and that persona leads both sales, marketing, and any other function that's related to go-to-market?
Such a good quote. I was actually writing that down, Jorge. And I think that we're seeing all sorts of different iterations and alignments. And, I do believe that that's one way to quickly get alignment, is like if we're all in the same, organization, it's a quick and easy fix to this. And so oftentimes, that is why that quote resonates so much, and, why it's, seen as an answer in a lot of these cases. But you have to kind of think about it, like what is the outcome that you're looking for? How do you make sure, that you have these kind of, pieces, working together there? Even in our past life, I think like one that doesn't get talked about often, my past life, your current life, sorry, Canva, which is a, product-led growth company. Like you don't often talk about like the power of product, but I think for us there, there was this, triumvirate of sales, marketing, and product, right? Not that. And so, it'd probably be weird to make, product report into a CRO, right? So I think you have to just think about like your scenario and what are you trying to emphasize, and how do you make sure that everybody has the right emphasis and voice in these situations. And so that's my answer on that. I would say like there's many ways to do this, but I think looking at alignment is critical if you want to have people kind of working together here.
Amazing. So I think I would be amiss if I don't ask you how demand base helps on that journey.
Yeah, look, we are a go-to-market platform that really helps take intent signals from your buyers. So if you are a sales and marketing team looking to go target Fortune 1000 as an example, and you know that you have these 1,000 targets you want to go after, and you sell to the CIO and the CMO. Look, we allow you to advertise to them more effectively through our account-based advertising solutions. We are able to show you kind of the intent signals of they're out on the internet researching you or your competition. Because of our DSP, you're able to see those signals. We can actually show you too as a customer, like, if John or Jorge is a potential buyer for you, you can see when John or Jorge are coming to the website regularly, and what pages we're spending time on, right? And so we stitch all those pieces together alongside enrichment and contact information to be able to say, okay, for your ICP of these 1,000 customers, Jorge, who is the CIO of one of your hottest companies, he is really ready to buy. He's showing, these great intent signals. And so you as an SDR tomorrow, when you wake up, like your first call should be Jorge of the 1,000 you need to make, right? And so allows you to show up again, super informed on, the buyer, their pain points, you'll have the contact information, and you'll be able to show up and say like, I can help you right now with this problem that you're facing in a way that, hopefully, allows you to cut through the noise like we talked about.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so expensive, and it takes so much work to get people to a website or a landing page that if you're not prioritizing that, you're just leaving money on the table, right? It's the ultimately the philosophy there.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I think like the prospecting list of a team that's using our tool, looks a lot less daunting, right? And again, it's like, okay, here's the folks that are ready to buy or thinking about buying, and they're in this part of it. You can even map it down to where they are in the purchasing decision, which is great. And so it gives you just this great informed viewpoint versus the pounding the rock of I've got 1,000 calls to make, or I have 1,000 emails to send out in outreach in hopes that one or two kind of lean back in and say like, I'd love to talk here. So it does build towards this future. We use a lot of AI. We've acquired a number of data assets, and we have some great data in our intent signals that allows you to build this quickly, with a provider like us.
Awesome. John, I have one last question from the chat and one last question from me. From the chat, what are your favorite sales books? And what is the top 3 you'd love your team to read when they ramp up?
All right. Great question. My favorite book of all time is not a sales book, but I will give you a sales book in here too, is The 4 Agreements. I think it actually is great and a timely read right now for anybody, personally, kind of, struggling through adversity in this, kind of economic climate we're in. So I'd say that's number one. I am a big fan of probably the Challenger sale. If I had to say like what is one that I really liked, I think that was super, revolutionary for me when I was, kind of coming up in my sales career, and just like the viewpoint of how you stand out from the noise and have messaging that really resonates in a unique way there. I also love, maybe when you're going through a breakup, I think people always say you listen to a lot of stuff like country music, right? Like you kind of seek out these things. Like books that I've really, enjoyed rereading during this time too. The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, another great one that I think is just like really, important to just help, kind of folks, think through real stories and examples. Ben's a great writer and a great way of telling these stories that he went through, but it, is very reminiscent of the time that we're going through today, and it really kind of paints a picture of like, why going through some of these hard things that we're going through is going to make us a better professional here.
Absolutely. And I wanted to finish on a positive note. Just seeing the last couple of years has been tough for sales, right? There's new tech. I think there's tech and sales and SaaS sales is going through a bit of an evolution. What is your case for hope? What gives you hope? What gives you courage to continue?
Yeah, I actually have a lot of hope. I would say, I do think that, some of the things we talked about, like I think the SDR job has gotten to be, it's one of the hardest jobs in the company. It's always been, I think, like, and intentionally it needs to be, like, I think it's how, we figure out who has the chops and the skills to kind of take it to the next step. So I think everybody should do that job, but I think it's gotten harder. And I think for all the reasons we talked about, like, the signal to noise and all these things, being able to stand out, being able to be differentiated, and just do it day in and day out. But I do think, like, the thing that really excites me is, like, it's going to get easier. Like, I think actually a lot of the stuff that was really, really hard is about to go away. You had a really great post about, like, with AI, could it, and we're already seeing it, and it's just been amazing. Like, right now, Zoom meetings and Gong calls get transcribed for me, and I get the notes dumped into my inbox, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So I'm not having to do that anymore. I think I'm a big fan of what Gong's doing on, tracking a lot of these different touch points. And so when we're forecasting, you can just see the heat map of how a deal is progressing. And you can almost, like, as a leader, you can dial in quickly and see where things are progressing and, call it there. But I think, like, how the post that you said that I thought really resonated was, like, I could see a world with AI and all of this stitching together. No longer are the questions of, like, did you update Salesforce, right? Like, Salesforce is just getting updated to the back.
Those are gone. Those are gone.
Yeah. I think actually the notes happen, right? And the opportunity gets updated, based on activity. Like, I think that's going to be a really cool world when we get there.
Amazing. John, we're at the end of the session. Thank you so much. It's always good to see you, friend. And we will see each other hopefully over some barbecue soon.
Likewise. Great seeing you all. Thanks for having me on.
It was a pleasure.
All right.
Thank
Take care.
Bye-bye.